The latest Netflix true crime miniseries is called Worst Roommate Ever, and it'll make you rethink the severity of all your horrible roommate experiences. Instead of focusing on one criminal for the entire series, like in the Tinder Swindler or Bad Vegan, Worst Roommate Ever focuses on a new criminal per episode. Episode 3, Marathon Man, is about a Texas woman named Callie Quinn who moved to Chile in 2011. Little did she know that her new roommate, Youssef was a serial fraudster. Some of his crimes included scamming Palestinian charities, stealing money from his housemates, and even trying to bury Callie alive. He only served 602 days in jail before being sent to Denmark in 2014, where he served another 3 months. Once out, Youssef adopted several fake identities to keep scamming people. But this was just the beginning. Youssef's story runs much deeper than you could ever imagine. There are two sides to every coin. In this instance, the coin is the relationship between Youssef and Callie. Youssef was the oldest of the housemates. He identified as a Palestinian, born in Israel, but raised in Denmark. After spending a few years in the Palestinian Special Forces, he moved to Chile under the Federación Palestina de Chile, an organization representing Chile's largest Palestinian population, the largest outside of Palestine. As an impressive athlete, the organization sponsored Youssef to break the world record running the 2,653-mile length of Chile. Youssef told his housemates about his intense physical training with the Danish Special Forces during meals and downtime. That training included standing in a room full of mace or swimming to the bottom of a 40-foot deep pool. Two of the housemates, Ed and Sabby, loved listening to his stories. Callie just rolled her eyes. Callie was a bright-eyed girl who moved to Chile for her love of travel, sense of adventure, and the easy visa process. She taught English and moved into a 12-bedroom house that seemed more like a hostel. She became friends with all her housemates, except for Youssef, who complained that she talked too much. But even Callie had to admit that Youssef seemed like an impressive guy. When one of his friends or housemates got sick, he would run to the grocery store to make them a vitamin C smoothie. He gave away the sportswear he received from his sponsors, administered free acupuncture to friends, and gathered his housemates for random movie nights with chocolate. Callie was starting to come around to Youssef. According to Youssef, he was born to a hard-working mother and a cruel father. Youssef was one of 5 children. In school, he was a popular, athletic kid who began running marathons at 11. When his parents separated, he joined the Danish infantry at 18 and became one of the few selected for the Special Forces. But he was a wanted man in Denmark. Even after charges were brought against him with plenty of evidence, Youssef maintained his innocence with the stone-cold demeanor of a psychopath. One day, Youssef mentioned to Callie that he had just bought 2 new condos downtown and offered to rent them out to her and another housemate, Molly. He offered them a low price, and they accepted for just $1,000, which included the first month's rent and security deposit. The day before move-in, Callie set up a meeting with Youssef to get the keys to her new place. Youssef arrived late to their meeting because he was apparently planning a search and rescue mission for 3 Danish women stranded in the Atacama Desert. Pretty noble, huh? Youssef invited Callie out for dinner after and was surprised to find that she enjoyed his company. When their housemate Sabi called him, Callie could hear that she was upset. Youssef owed Sabi money and hadn't paid her back for several months. He promised to send the money back to the house with Callie. During dinner, Youssef talked about a house that burned down in town that apparently had a golden toilet. He suggested they go and find it, and Callie agreed. They snuck into the burnt home, and as soon as Callie saw the regular beige toilet seat, she turned to leave. She had to be up early for work the next day, and it was already getting late. Then, Youssef attacked her. He went on and on about owing people money and that it was all Callie's fault. Callie passed out, and Youssef left her there, never expecting her to return. A frantic Sabi was nervous because Callie hadn't answered her calls in hours. Callie was supposed to be bringing home the money Youssef owed her, nearly $1,000. She heard Youssef come home and start knocking on everyone's doors, asking if they'd seen Callie. Another housemate, Ed, suddenly saw Callie in her long puffy coat in the distance. He and Youssef ran outside. Callie began yelling at Youssef immediately, asking how he could do that to her. Sabi and Molly saw Callie's wounded head and called a cab to the hospital. Callie told them everything. After Youssef left her unconscious, Callie dreamed her family was screaming at her to wake up. She finally snapped awake to find she'd been wrapped in a tarp, stuffed in a closet, and buried beneath a foot of ash. Molly and Ed wanted to believe her, but thought she must have been confused. Youssef could never do something like that. Ed and Sabby returned to the house. Youssef pretended to be sympathetic when they described what happened to Callie, but denied the attack. Youssef told Molly that his mother had died in the middle of the night and he needed to go back to Denmark. He disappeared without a trace. The next day, Callie woke up still coughing up ash. She had Molly file a police report on her behalf. A man came to take Callie's information, but she had difficulty remembering the entire story. To outsiders, it didn't make sense. If Youssef tried to hurt her, why weren't there bruises on her neck? Why would he get violent over such a small sum of money? The report noted the incident as a dispute between two foreigners. In the meantime, Molly tried to get in touch with Callie's family. Finally, she reached her brother John on Facebook. Callie's parents received word of the attack and Skyped with their injured daughter. They wanted to hop on a plane and see her, but Callie said no. She couldn't risk it with Youssef still on the loose. But this is only the midpoint of Youssef's story. Let's go back to the beginning. Carlos Medina was a member of the Federación Palestina and an avid Chilean soccer fan. Medina and his friend Carlos Kraus helped raise $8,000 to sponsor Youssef in the Atacama race, a 155-mile race through the Atacama Desert in Chile. Medina and Kraus were excited to show a different side of the Palestinian people. But on the second day of the race, Youssef dropped out, saying that the marathon organizers noticed a tear in his leg and forced him to exit the course. Youssef said it was racially motivated. So Medina and Kraus took Youssef to get the tear examined by a doctor and prove wrongdoing. When the diagnosis came in, no muscle tear, Youssef stopped responding to their texts and calls. Medina and Kraus contacted Youssef's friend, Dominic Rayner, a fellow marathoner from England who said Youssef owed him money. Rayner previously bought him $12,000 worth of Under Armour gear and paid $38,000 to purchase properties in Brazil that Youssef suggested they could invest in together. The real estate broker kept giving excuses for why he couldn't send Rayner a receipt and then accidentally signed one email as Youssef. Rayner demanded his money, and Youssef gave him two options. The money could be wired to him, or he could come to Chile and get it. Rayner decided to meet Youssef at the airport in Chile. But of course, Youssef was nowhere to be found. 12 hours later, Youssef met Rayner in the city and took him on a walk to show him where he was living. It was the house that Callie would move into 2 weeks later. The next day, Youssef took him on a 3-hour hike to the city's outskirts where their lawyer worked. At one point, Rayner dropped down to tie his shoe. Then, Youssef charged at him with a walking stick and struck him. Youssef charged at Rayner and was about to take his life when he noticed two people watching nearby. He pushed Rayner into a ditch and urged him not to tell anyone what happened. He told Rayner that he spent all his money, a total of $55,000. Rayner left Santiago the next day and filed a report with the British Metropolitan Police Service and Interpol. No one knew where Youssef was hiding. Criminal attorney Rocco Barrios heard Medina, Rayner, and Callie's stories and wanted to track down Youssef. It seemed like everywhere he went, money disappeared. He stole cash from a friend's bag and blamed the hostel owner. Then he persuaded a Norwegian athlete to invest $10,000 in property in Brazil and then stole the cash. He even convinced people in Denmark to transfer $28,000 to purchase flights and then kept the money for himself. Youssef's crime spree was documented across Denmark. Though arrested in 2009 for several of his crimes, he failed to appear in court for his trial in January 2011. He was still wanted for arson, embezzlement, forgery, and fraud. Palestinian activist Mahar Khatib heard about Youssef's crimes and was furious at how he was damaging the reputation of the Palestinian people. After tons of research, he found Youssef's sister on Facebook, who was a lawyer in Copenhagen. As soon as she picked up the phone, she started crying, saying that Youssef had destroyed her entire family's lives. Not only that, but he created an entire web of lies. He wasn't born in Haifa. He was born in Beirut. He wasn't even Palestinian. He was Lebanese. Barrios communicated all of this to Youssef's victims via email. Together they figured out the perfect plan. They discovered that Youssef had just written to his ex-girlfriend asking for money for an arm and leg amputation. If she wired him the money, the police could get him when he picked it up. But the night before the transfer, Youssef told his ex he was sending a Taiwanese sponsor named Lin Chai Min to pick up the cash instead. Officers tracked Chai Min to a Chile Express money agency where they found Youssef sitting in the car and arrested him. 2 days before Callie's 24th birthday, she received an email from Barrios saying, "We got him." But still, he denied attacking Callie. A psychologist saw him at Santiago Uno jail awaiting trial without bail. After many tests and interviews, Youssef admitted to striking Callie in the head but said he never intended to hurt her. He just wanted to confuse her into thinking he had returned her condo deposit. The psychologist said that Youssef displayed narcissistic, paranoid, and asocial traits. He lacked empathy and used his friends. He showed many of the classic psychopathic traits. He was charismatic, egotistical, promiscuous, and a liar. Most importantly, he had no conscience. Youssef was basically out of prison in 3 years between his sentences in Chile and Denmark. In Chile, there are 2 kinds of attempted murder charges. One is for those who try to hurt someone and fail. The other is for one who have a plan and then abort the mission. The latter carries a much softer penalty. Barrios believed Youssef was guilty of the first charge, but tried to prove the second because the witnesses, aka Callie's old housemates, were scattered around the world and couldn't testify. On the other hand, Youssef's attorney believed he could win him a short sentence because he was a first-time offender in Chile. Barrios showed the judge Youssef's criminal record from Denmark, but it had little effect. The judge sentenced Youssef to 541 days for attempted murder and 61 days for fraud. Youssef, however, had already served more than half of his sentence while awaiting trial. After prison in Chile, he was extradited to Denmark, facing 5 more charges. Unfortunately, they acquitted Youssef of 3 charges and released him 3 months later. One September day, Callie received an email from Barrios with a link to a news article about Youssef. He apparently fled to Costa Rica, where he met a Canadian traveler named Sheena Taylor and scammed her out of $19,000. Taylor was a down-on-her-luck single mother, and Youssef was just what she needed. He held a birthday party for her daughter, brought her breakfast in bed, and took her shopping. But there were some red flags, like when Youssef said he could leave her in the jungle and nobody would find her, or when he pressed a pillow to her face. But she looked past these things because of the happiness Youssef brought her. One day, Youssef never returned to their room in the hostel. A concerned Taylor went to the bank only to discover that someone had drained her bank account. Youssef took her bank card and memorized her PIN. All her savings were gone. When he arrived in Quepos, Costa Rica the previous June, Youssef adopted the alias Joseph Carter so no one discovered his real identity. He asked a Texan-born store owner, Todd Flanders, to spot him for $3,500 of Under Armour clothes, promising that his sponsors would reimburse him later. Flanders was known around the town of Quepos for his incredible generosity and big personality. When Youssef told Flanders that thieves stole $10,000 from him, Flanders agreed to spot him during a tough time. The two became friends and went to a boxing gym together. When Flanders told Youssef that he was getting divorced and fighting for custody of his children, Youssef offered to help by getting a hold of secondhand cell phones that Flanders could sell at his shop and use the profits for legal fees. But the cell phones never arrived, and neither did the money from Youssef's sponsors. Taylor found Flanders by tracing one of Youssef's sportswear packages. Taylor and Flanders started piecing together Youssef's story through Danish and Chilean newspaper articles. When Flanders confronted Youssef on WhatsApp, he stopped responding. Flanders and Taylor reported Youssef to Costa Rica's FBI. But just like Callie's case, they dismissed Youssef's activities as disputes between foreigners. When Callie heard about this, she was heartbroken. After everything she went through, Youssef was still at it, destroying people's lives. Callie emailed Taylor, who never responded. Then Callie found out that Flanders took his own life after losing one daughter and a fierce custody battle for the others. Still, Youssef roams free. Callie imagined him walking the streets of Costa Rica, charming women and swindling strangers. But Digital Spy reported that Youssef moved to Nicaragua in 2019, where he served a few months for fraud and was extradited back to Denmark. He probably started life under a new name and will do it all over again. Click to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comments section, what would you rather do right now? Have to take on a roommate or have to pay double your rent or mortgage?